Dun da da da. It says connecting. So mine's thinking about it. We're doing it. We're getting it. That's like there we go. All good to
Good
go.
to go.
Beautiful.
Woo.
Excellent. We're here. We did it. We made it back yet to another session. It just started, so we'll give a couple of folks a few more moments to join us. We're going to send out, team, can you make sure to get something into the feed? Alerts, reminders, get folks to join us. But, really, this one's particularly interesting to me for a couple of reasons. But one, I'm just going to go a little bit. I introduced you to, if I'm not mistaken, right?
You
First
did.
introduction. I met both of them, had amazing conversations with both Ashleigh and Heidi, and I was like, this is a no-brainer. The two of them should meet. And then fast forward a few months, and here they are, co-hosting in the Virtual Sales Summit here in Accelerate 2021. And we're talking about a very, very important topic, right? As far as having fun and out playing and having a good time, that's all great. But we definitely want your feedback, your input, and this to be engaging for you all as well in the audience. But we're talking about diversity hiring and closing the gender gap in sales because it's historically a very one-sided field. So definitely interested. I'm going to be sitting back, learning, taking notes. But with that said, Heidi and Ashleigh, if you could both provide the audience with a little bit more about each of you and your respective organizations, and I'll leave it to you.
That sounds great. Ashleigh, you want to kick it off?
Why not? All right. So hello, everyone. Quick note, we did drop a poll. So please tell us basically just what your current role is. We want to make sure we're making this as relevant as possible to literally who actually took their time to invest their morning, their afternoon, their evening, whatever, with us today. So please, 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 if you haven't taken that yet, please take it. That's great information for us. My name is Ashleigh Early. I am the CEO and founder of Other Side of Sales, as well as a sales consultant, coach, and cheerleader. I work as a fractional head of sales for the Duck Bill Group, which is an AWS bill consulting firm, as well as with a bunch of different companies on short-term projects, helping their teams scale. But my passion is really getting more people into sales and making B2B sales culture truly inclusive so everyone can thrive. So new episodes drop every other Thursday, othersideofsales.com. Pick your podcast catcher. It's exclusively interviews with amazing sales pros that you should be watching to show that sales, success in sales can look and sound like whatever you look and sound like if you're willing to put in the work and if you're willing to fight for a healthy environment to work in. So super excited. It's funny, David mentioned that he introduced Heidi. Heidi and I have been like circling each other on LinkedIn for like 2 years because I know we share a lot of these same passions. So this is super exciting on a lot of different levels to be here today. And Heidi, I'll kick it over to you and everything Girls Who Sell.
Oh, thank you, Ashleigh. You're so amazing. And David, thanks for being an incredible dot connector. And I want to also just do a shout out to Elliot Garcia, who's been phenomenally supportive. So thanks to the entire Accelerate team for having me here today and allowing us to talk about a subject that, like you, David, is incredibly dear to my heart. My day job, I'm Vice President of Global Sales for VXI Global Solutions. I've spent over 30 years, maybe started before some of you were born, in business-to-business sales. And if you think it's male-dominated now, you should have seen it 30 years ago. Fast forward 30, plus years, and really began to give a lot of thought to how to democratize professional sales. And so I founded Girls Who Sell in the latter part of 2020. We officially kicked off this year, so we're still a scrappy bootstrapped startup, but the response and reaction to what we're doing is incredible. And our mission is to not only close the gender gap in business-to-business sales, but to also build the largest pipeline of diverse early-stage female sales talent, position sales as a viable career option for everyone. So while I'm really excited here to be talking about diversity hiring, to be honest, I'm looking forward to the day that we can just be talking about hiring and that diversity becomes more normalized and is not something that we have to actually, have sessions on. So
Here.
that here, right? Snap, snap, snap. So, that in order to, anyway, so that's it. So Ashleigh, what do we have any results to our poll?
Yeah, so it looks like we have a good mix. We have a few, I'd say we're about 1/3 sales directors, head of sales, about 2/3 kind of individual contributors. So AEs, SDRs, I got a few people from marketing and some other ancillary, but crucial roles on the team, which is super exciting. So great mix. So about kind of, 1/3, 2/3 ballpark.
Very
Do not trust
nice.
my math.
So I know, Ashleigh, we kind of had an agenda. We wanted to talk about 3 things today, and I'm going to let you kind of lead the conversation. But one was sourcing strategies, interview techniques, and then some decision criteria. And we'd like to dig into each of those things. And our goal is to really give you some actionable things that you can take with you and deploy into your organization. So Ashleigh, why don't you take it away and kick it off with sourcing?
Yeah, and I think I'll start with kind of even taking it a step further back in terms of kind of like why this is even important in the first place. The Great Recession is happening. The Great Reshuffling is happening. I really think talent acquisition and retention is going to be one of the major sticking points for sales teams, especially in Q1. Y'all thought Q4 was rough. Wait for January. It's going to be interesting on LinkedIn, some of the shuffling that's going to be happening. And more people I'm talking to today, job seekers, and especially even people who've been in their careers 5, 10 years, 10, 15 years, 20 years, they're no longer willing to put up with unhealthy work environments. So being able to demonstrate constructive DEI policies in your interview process is a major recruiting tool to make sure you're not only getting the right talent, but the right talent wants to work for you. So DEI is something that will actually help you attract talent, and it'll help you keep it on board, as well as making sure you're getting the right people, because let's be honest, you need a diverse sales team because your buyers are diverse. And if you don't have that diversity of thought on your team, you're not going to be able to react in a positive and profitable way to the market going upside down, which we all know it does about every 12 months now. So just why this is important in the first place. This is key to success in 2022 and beyond. These are DEI strategies are no longer a nice to have. They are table stakes. And it's not just policy, it's action. And the best way to start showing action is in the 3 things that we're going to be talking about today: sourcing, the interview process, and your decision criteria. So
yeah, and if I could only add, thanks for doing that. And one of the things that you and I had talked a lot about today is that and we actually did a LinkedIn poll, the 2 of us, and the results were not surprising, maybe, but reinforced the fact that diversity and equity and inclusion has become more and more important in terms of the decision-making criteria used to select and commit to a job with an organization. In fact, it even scored way higher than compensation in terms of what was important. And some of the younger generation in particular, as we look to source millennials and Gen Zers that are coming up the pipeline and moving from early stage talent into management, they're voting with their wallets, right, Ashleigh? I mean, they're looking for organizations that are not only talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but are living it, particularly from an organizational standpoint. So, yeah.
So perfect. Let's talk about how to live it.
Got to live it.
So let's talk about how we can do that. So first way you can live kind of actionable DEI strategies is take a look at how you're sourcing. Kind of the TLDR, or the too long didn't read, for those of you who have read it, for this section is stop relying on LinkedIn. Stop. LinkedIn is going to be predominantly white, college educated, and male. Now that's changing. It's better. But realistically, that's going to be a lot of the candidates that you're going to get. It's going to skew that way. You cannot rely on LinkedIn. So given that you want the widest, most diverse talent pool possible, you have to start getting creative and figure out other ways to source talent. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Obviously, there's using your own internal referrals, but referrals tend to only amplify what you already have. So if you're doing good with diversity, hit up everyone in your team. And if people are willing to refer people to where you work, that's a big positive for both the company and the employees. So referrals are always great, but sometimes you need to improve diversity or you haven't been able to nail that yet. So where do you get that applicant pool? a couple different things you can look at. One of the big things that Heidi and I kind of did thinking about this is you have to partner with groups that are trying to change this. So we're going to rattle off a bunch of names. I'm going to do a LinkedIn post right after this. So come find me. I'll hyperlink all of these. But partner with groups that are trying to change this. So off the top of my head, obviously, GirlzWhoSell is a fantastic group. If you're not familiar, please do go check them out. There's also Sales for the Culture, which is for Black sales pros. One of my co-hosts from Other Side of Sales, Brian Woodard, is deeply involved with them. There's Girls Club, which does not with a Z, with an S. They do some great mentorship and training. And then there's a couple other groups that are not sales specific.
Sisters in Sales with Chantel George. Sisters in Sales.
Oh God, yeah, Sisters in Sales, yeah. SISTAS.
Is incredible. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Sisters in Sales. There's a couple others that are there's a bunch that are women specific, and actually I recommend, if you want to get a list of all the women in sales groups, check out SheSellsSummit.com. There was a great summit that Lori Richardson put on a couple months ago that got together all the kind of women in sales groups. And there were a lot of us spoke at that too, but that's a great kind of index of where to look for everything there. But partnering with groups like that, posting on their job boards. I'll tell you this, I was recently hiring someone at Duckbill, and we bought a job listing with Sisters in Sales, specifically because we wanted to make sure we're getting the best sourcing possible. And that was a huge help because we were showing our money where our mouth is. We were advertising to a target demographic that was, not just to bring in diversity, but also making sure that we were hitting people who had the right experience that we wanted. If I'd had more money, I would have done a lot more of those, but making sure you're working this stuff in.
Yes. And those are all important sources. The other thing that I would really encourage everyone to do is normalize sourcing in spaces that are overrepresented for untapped populations. And what I mean by that is to source, engage, and build long-term relationships with schools and universities, colleges,
trade schools,
high schools, traditional Black-owned colleges, or BIPOC
HBCUs,
colleges.
Yeah.
It's really important to do that, because particularly the universities and community colleges that have sales programs, and the Sales Education Foundation, Marty Holmes is phenomenal. If you go onto the Sales Education Foundation website, you'll see all of the colleges that have sales education programs. And there's
far more than you realize.
Yeah, and these candidates that are coming out of these sales programs are hitting the ground running. They're moving through learning curve. They're delivering on their sales targets faster than individuals that do not have exposure than these universities. And I will tell you, they are highly in demand. Most of these universities, these students are getting recruited in junior and high school. Junior and senior levels within these universities, and they're having 100% placement. So it's really competitive.
Another thing, I gotta say, super important, nothing you can do, because I'm a firm believer that you should not need a college degree to work in sales. It's a nice to have, it is not a need to have. Look at sales specific programs. So looking at companies like Vendition, Victory Lap, Aspireship, Pre-Hired, Rework. There's a ton of these. Like I said, I'm throwing a lot of these out really quick. I promise we will hyperlink all of these, so come find us on LinkedIn. But those schools, I've worked with everyone I just mentioned. They all do some great work around sourcing within underrepresented communities and making sure they get also training and stuff like that too. So there's a ton of them out there. The ones I just named are ones I've worked with personally. I can vouch for the caliber of their candidates. They're great people. Tell them I sent you. But there's always bumps in the road, but it's worth it to have as many tools in the toolkit as it were to get these things going. And especially if you're a small company that's only hiring 1 or 2 people a year, partnering with those programs versus a traditional university can be a better option, because it gives you kind of an access to more quicker. Whereas the universities and stuff like that, they're always happy to run a job posting, but they're not going to really help you source if you're not hiring 5, 10, 15 people a quarter, because they just don't have the time. So there's a lot of really great stuff, and make sure definitely you're taking a look at like the Sales Education Foundation and reaching out to your local, if you are hiring on site, your local community colleges, especially. There's tons of stuff for, and I'd say even not even just the sales programs, but look at non-traditional sales things. So for example, I don't have degrees in anything remotely relevant directly to sales. I have a degree in political science and I have a degree in opera. Those two things made me very good at sales for very different reasons, but I never considered sales as a career. I just knew I wanted to make more money than I would make doing opera. So
yeah,
it's the sort of thing.
I kind of push back a little bit on the colleges, because I do think they have a lot of candidates that are coming out of there as seniors that are graduating, and the colleges and universities have job fairs that they're doing. So while I agree, all the companies, I see that Deborah also mentioned SV Academy, great program, agree. But I can't overemphasize the importance of looking at colleges and universities as a potential recruiting resource for you, and get involved. I mean, sponsor, as a company, go in, sponsor a college program. These universities are always looking for corporate sponsorships, and you get first selection of the graduates that are coming out of those programs that you can bring into SDR and BDR roles, or even hire as interns. So anyway,
I think you're spot on. One of the things that I found is, like, when I didn't have the budget to sponsor a booth, I did have a recruiting budget that I could spend on through the school. So that was something I did. The other thing you can do if you don't have budget for the university sponsoring a booth or something like that, reach out to the teachers, the professors. I've guest lectured about a dozen times. And every single time I do, I drop my LinkedIn and I say, when you guys are looking for work, come find me. And there's always a couple people that do. And that's my intern pool constantly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do that doesn't cost anything.
It's so much fun to talk to these students, and they're phenomenal. And, listen, the youth are our future, right? They're the future of the organization. So it's super fun. There's also lots of sales competitions that you can sponsor and be a part of as well. Go and judge, go and speak, get involved. There's so much that you can do to source through non-traditional channels outside of LinkedIn.
And starting with these schools and stuff like that, that's great for entry level too. You have to do the stuff like if you're sourcing for SDRs and stuff like this. But even being seen to be sourcing like this and building these partnerships, there are alumni that will see this. There are people who will keep an eye on your candidates will check your LinkedIn. They'll check to say, oh, you were in HBCU last month. That's really cool. I now feel a little more comfortable seeing that you're putting in the work. So it's not just about getting the entry-level people in, it's being seen to do this work, to get the diverse talent pool, to get the mid and upper level people who are now, like I said, making this table stakes to get in and really get high caliber in.
All right. So now we talked about how to get candidates. Let's talk about how to interview candidates.
Yes. Two things I want to mention really quickly about sourcing, just because we didn't get to, because we went on a rant, but a couple things that are really important. One, if anyone knows of any groups that are focused on advocating or placing people with disabilities or different abilities, whether mobility or otherwise, please let us know. Heidi and I were racking our brains. We don't know of any. There have to be some out there. If anyone knows, please let us know. We will add it to the post at the end of this. Also, don't forget, when you're sourcing, put pay and benefits in the job description. That's super important for pay equity. It's also super important as a differentiator. I'll tell you this, as someone who is a cis woman, one of the things that is table stakes for me anytime I'm looking at a company is I insist on trans benefits. I don't insist on trans benefits because I need them. I insist on them because someone else will. And so when I see that in a job description, I know that's a safe place for me to work, because they are embracing rights for other people and they're putting that very publicly. So if you've got these benefits, advertise them so people understand you're putting your money where your mouth is and you're living it every day. Put in the job description. That way it's a no-brainer going forward. Now the interview process.
Yeah. And I love that too, because that's a perfect example of what you just brought up, Ashleigh, of putting your money where your mouth is, and not just, where you're actually living DE&I, not just giving it lip service.
Yeah. Okay,
All
so
right.
interview process. So, I mean, obviously this is going to vary depending on what level of person you're hiring, but we're going to talk kind of core concepts for how to do an interview process in a way that reinforces this stuff. And again, gets you the right people with the right caliber and keeps them engaged with you guys. So one thing you can do kind of along the same line of what I was just talking with is check your own language and push yourself to use gender neutral language in the job interview process as much as you can and get your whole hiring process to do that. They, them can be singular. Don't assume pronouns. Start just doing that from the very start of the interview process. Train your recruiters to ask for pronouns if the person doesn't offer them. It's a really subtle thing, but it's a really good kind of code word to say this is a safe place, not just for LGBTQ, but for everyone, period. And then try to use it throughout the process. I've been working really hard lately on trying to get guys out of my vocabulary. It's apparently a hard habit to break, but keeping these things top of mind and then using the interview process as a place to showcase them can be really powerful.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And again, just on to pile on a little bit onto the language thing, really look at the exact language that you're looking at in your recruiting ads. There's research that shows that if you use words like aggressive or we're come and kill it, and we have whatever, right? Like that's really I guess more male oriented for lack of a better term. You're not going to more male gendered. You're not going to necessarily attract women, right? Women in particular are looking for organizations. They want to be a part of a team. They want to be able to collaborate. They want to be able to solve problems. And so I think as you're putting your job ads together, it's really important to assess the language that you're using and being sure that they're more gender neutral. You have to also understand that take a look at the qualifications, and maybe we're getting into decision criteria a little bit, but one of the things that just drives me nuts, and I know Ashleigh, you and I were talking a lot about this, is there's a list of 100 criteria, entry level job, and we want
5 years experience,
15 years of experience, right? Whatever. And it's just that it's incongruent. So please get real with the qualifications that you're looking for, particularly for diverse candidates and for female candidates, because they're less likely to apply if they don't meet the qualifications than perhaps a male candidate. So just something to take into consideration.
Yeah, and there's a study that particular idea is sourced from that's been called into question in recent years. But what we do know is that women and minorities especially are less likely to apply when they don't feel welcome by the job description. It's the feeling the job description makes. So a really quick hack, there are services you can pay that will actually run it through an algorithm that will tell you how you're doing on this. My quick hack is find women on the team, find minorities on the team, and have them read your job description. Hey, how does this make you feel? And just ask them that. They're not, make sure they're okay with it. You don't want to turn it into tokenism or ask them to be representative of their particular identity, but it can be a really good kind of gut check and just tell like, hey, I'm just trying to get a gut check. Does this feel too aggressive? Does this feel too masculine? Does this feel too, how does this make you feel? Would you feel safe applying this? Does this reflect our culture? Yes, no, maybe, adjust. You don't have to pay a ton of money to do DEI. Just be a little thoughtful and take feedback where you can get it. Along that same line, actually, with the job descriptions is take the time and make sure you know the rules. I do not have enough fingers to count how many times I've been asked in a job interview if I'm planning to have kids. Let's be clear. That's illegal in every major Western country.
Or what is your current salary? Guess what?
Well, now that's illegal in a lot of states.
So
know the rules. If you are a hiring manager and you're not certain about what you're allowed to ask and what you're not allowed to ask in interviews, go to HR, insist on training. I tell people this story all the time. I did not get it when I was first promoted to a hiring manager. HR literally told me, go look it up. Hindsight, I really wish I pushed back and been like, no, I'm not interviewing until you train me on this stuff, because I know for a fact that I did a few things that were wrong. And that it's not a huge deal, but it is a big deal. We can insist on better. Look it up, know the rules, talk to HR. If you don't have HR, talk to your boss, make sure you understand what you can and can't ask. Everything from just something as simple as how are you planning to get to work is illegal to ask. So make sure you know the rules and hold yourself to a higher standard.
Absolutely. And then the only last point I would add, and I knew we were going to run out of time, but the only last point I would add is bias is inherent in the interviewing process. It just is. So you need to get real and really take a look at yourself as a hiring manager, in terms of your own bias. But I believe that companies should invest in bias training if you can. Or do your homework and do your research and really get in touch with that so that you understand the part that it plays as a part of the process.
So take some time, make sure you understand what you can and can't ask. Just know the rules. It's a subtle thing, but it makes a big difference. Just asking something as simple, and I get it. Like the intent is like, oh, I just want them to think I care about them, and we're a family-oriented place, and it's not a big deal. I get the intent, but the reality is it puts people in a really tough situation. So the rules are there for a reason, not only just to protect you and the company, but like take it a step further and really, we have to own this at an individual level, not just at a company level or waiting for the company to train you. That's not going to work long term. Another thing that's really important, and this is a new thing, I would say this is something that I would not have encouraged people to do last year this time. So 2020, I'd say December of 2020, I don't know that I would have encouraged this the same way I do now, but that's this idea of asking hard questions. So specifically, what that means is you want candidates who ask you questions about DEI. You want candidates who ask you, what are you going to do to protect me, to keep this a safe environment if I am sexually harassed by a prospect, if I am racially profiled by a prospect? What is your process for if an incident happens? What's your reporting and investigation process? Can I see your documentation around sexual harassment? Lean into that. That's not a sign that someone is a problem employee or is going to make trouble. That's a sign of someone who understands the world and is realistic and wants to make sure they're in an environment that aligns with their values. A year ago, I don't know I would have said that. I think I would have been, maybe don't bring that up in the process, be careful. Now I'm very full on, you want people to do that. And candidates are going to ask that. They're going to ask and they expect you to have an answer. So be ready for it and lean into it. That's a good thing.
And be sure you're calling out bad behavior when you see it in the organizations. Yes. Microaggressions are happening every day. And I don't know that they're always intentional. I think I like to give people the benefit of the doubt and that they're, we're all on a learning journey here around this D&I topic, right? Like we don't have all the answers, but recognize recognize bad behavior and be sure to call it out. And to Ashleigh's point, there needs to be policies and procedures in place to be able to deal with that. 100%. Great call out.
Yeah. And one other thing I'd say is most companies, so there's a bunch of people on this call who are here right now who I know who are individual contributors who are probably in their first year or two in sales. Your first year or two in sales, you can't really negotiate your comp that much. Once you're more than 1 or 2 years in, you can negotiate hard. I cannot stress the importance of negotiation when it comes to salary, when it comes to commission, and when it comes to mix and stuff like that. As an employer, someone negotiating hard for their salary is good because that means that's how hard they're going to negotiate for you and for your product. As a salesperson, you have to be willing to put it on the line with the negotiation to get the best thing you can. If the company does not like how hard you're negotiating or style with which you're negotiating, they're going to make you change your sales style when you're in there, and it's not going to be a good fit long term. I am not joking when I tell you that at every company I've been at, I have been the highest paid person at my level. And that is simply because my dad told me at like 18 that everything is negotiable and I had to negotiate every salary I got. So I did. That's added up to, I think I'm about to break the 1 million mark. that I know I was making. Luckily, one, I knew through a lot of different reasons, but one, I found out I was always in an equal pay situation. But two, I found out I was in every situation that I know of, I was the highest paid person on the team because I negotiated my butt off. I knew my worth and I insisted on it, and I walked when they didn't get it.
And I think it's important to know your worth, but it's also to have some foundation and reality too.
This is gut check.
Do your homework. I'm sorry,
Yes.
just excuse me. Do your homework in terms of what the what the career what this particular job in your industry sector is valued at, right? Like what's the wage range, and be
Do your
prepared.
research.
Do your research. Not only know, and I've actually been in situations where I've come in and, I sort of have a target goal of, of a package or of a base wage or whatever, and always ask higher. And I know it's scary. It's super scary when you're walking in and I've coached people to, practice and look in front of the mirror and do some negotiations, because basically you're selling yourself. And having that level of confidence, I know, can be challenging, but know your self-worth, but also have it based in some level of foundation, so that you can say, listen, I did my research. I know what companies at my career level, with my level of experience and my level of success, are getting paid.
Yep.
And don't accept anything less.
Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to, is don't accept anything less. And I think the biggest hurdle people come at with this is they think, I've invested all this time in this job search. This is the first time I've had an offer in a while. I need a job. I need a job. I need a job. I need a job. You do. I get it. I have been at that financial point of, if this job doesn't happen, I don't know how I'm going to make rent next month. And I know that pain in my soul. It is not worth it to take a job where you're going to be miserable and end up back on the job hunt in 2, 3, 6 months. It is not worth it.
And
you want to know these things.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
No, it's not, it feels like it's the end of the world. It isn't. And this is where community is so important. This is where having connections through organizations like Girls Who Sell or on LinkedIn, have people you can reach out to for sanity checks, gut check comp, check with other people, be open about saying what you make with discretion and politeness, but lean into these things. Hey, this is the package. What do you think? I do gut checks on comp, I'd say 3 days a week, with people who are reaching out. Hey, I'm in this metro. This is how much I'm making. Nothing of what I say is official in any way, but at least it's a gut check of, hey, wow, that's a little low. Hey, that's actually a really good comp. Good job. What's the mix? Are you happy with it? Because there's a lot of different elements to it. And there are a ton of people who do trainings and coaching specifically on negotiating salaries. And specifically, if you are someone who is really uncomfortable with this, if you're not comfortable negotiating your salary, negotiating hard, I strongly encourage you to look into some of these programs. If you want specifics, DM us, we'll get them to you, but you have to negotiate, and hiring managers should not punish you for that. They can give you feedback if you're doing it poorly, but it should be feedback, not, I don't want to hire this person because they're negotiating. And they'll never let a candidate go for 10 grand. They'll just play around with it. Okay, so maybe you wanted 160, they offered 150. Play with the mix. Maybe you get more on the salary and less on that, or vice versa, or you get better benefits, or you get a hiring. There's a million different things you can do. No one's going to let you go. No one's going to lose a candidate over 10 grand once you get above the first couple levels in sales.
Yeah, so, not a someone who's a proven asset, right? Who's exceeded their goals and is in that 1%. You are in the negotiation seat. You're the one. They should be convincing you of why you should come and work for them, not the other way around.
Cheers to that.
Absolutely. Right? Self-advocation is something that I learned a long time ago and try to teach, our kids, but especially our daughter. And thanks again, Heidi, for the honorary certificate and providing
you're
her.
Welcome. Did she love it?
Yeah, she loved it. So for Christmas,
David's daughter is how old is she? She's
11.
11. So I made her an honorary Girls Who Sell junior ambassador. So yeah.
It's
That's
yeah, look at Ashley's
adorable.
face. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt too, and she loved it. We're getting it. I'm getting it framed for Christmas, so it's gonna go up on a wall. Just a little extra thing,
Oh, I
right?
love
So
Yeah,
that.
I'll say if anyone else has daughters, I say daughters maybe 12 and under. John Barrows wrote a great children's book called I Want to Be in Sales When I Grow Up. It's delightful, and
Awesome.
all the proceeds go to his daughter's favorite charity. Um,
Yep.
but I've given to all my nieces, a couple friends. It's
It's
super, it's
amazing.
really well done. It's really cute.
absolutely.
Super
I
cute.
thanks for the recommendation. I'll definitely take that.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll jump over to some Q&A before wrapping it up. So just to make sure, as a reminder, if you had it in chat, feel free to recreate or populate that question in the Q&A section. We'll jump in over here and go with the first one. So question, we'll just kind of alternate and then let you both contribute to the answer, right? So we'll start with you, Ashleigh, this time. How can individual contributors contribute to bringing more inclusive policies into companies, right? More diversity in hiring. What can we do?
Yeah, good question. And I'll say you'd be surprised how many diversity efforts start with individual contributors. More often than not, I think they start with ICs and they start with leadership. And it starts by just asking the question. So, and it's especially helpful in my experience, I found it's especially powerful if you go to HR and ask what the policies are if the policies don't directly affect you. So, in my example earlier about trans policies, I worked for a company a few years ago, and they were just started to change some of the rules in California and stuff like that. So I went to HR and I was like, "Hey, out of curiosity, what's our company's plan for this new legislature that says that you have to cover these things? Are they currently covered by our policies or not?" And our HR department had no clue. They were like, "Oh, I don't know." 2 weeks later, we had a company issued public statement about that. Hey, they actually are covered by our current policies already. Yay! And we're setting up this additional benefit that if anyone needs it, there's an additional like something you can expense or will support or something like that. And they told me like, it started with me. They just honestly didn't know. They just missed it. They just hadn't gotten the memo yet. So me just coming up and asking did a lot. The other thing I think ICs can do is just ask to see copies of the policies. A lot of DEI policies start off as, "Oh, well, we're going to do unconscious bias training." Okay, well, where is that written? How often is it done? Who does it? Is it managers or is it everybody? Going through those things, just ask, what's the written policy? Is there one? Can I help write one? Or can I, what can I do to help drive these things? Can I find other things, suggest stuff like that? But just asking the question honestly is 80% of the battle. And then if nothing happens, get somebody else to ask it. And then just kind of slowly creates this little bit of momentum in the company. That's a
Kind of
huge
squeaky
thing.
wheel it,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, let me just add, the only thing I want to add to that, and that's all really good feedback, is get involved, and definitely if you see ads that are out there that are not aligned, provide feedback to your HR and recruiting managers. The one thing that I would also encourage is if your organization has ERGs and if they don't, start one. So whether it's for any kind of diverse group, it's important to be sure that the voices within the organization are heard. And I think ERGs are a great way to create safe spaces and to encourage diversity within your company. So be sure you get involved.
I'll say this too, and I've worked at a lot of companies that weren't big enough to have ERGs. I work with a company right now that's 10 people. There doesn't really make much sense to have an ERG of 2 women. But one of the things that I found you can do is you can say, "Hey, we don't have an ERG yet. We're not big enough. I get it. No big deal. Would the company fund my membership in an organization that does provide a lot of the same services?" So asking your company, "Hey, because you can't do this, would you be willing to fund this?" And membership in some of these groups is not a lot. Most managers would be willing to be like, "Oh yeah, I will totally fund you doing that because there's a professional development angle to it too, so it's tax deductible." So like ask your
Awesome.
managers for stuff like that. If you can't, ERG is preferable. Second best is get the company, if they can't do an ERG, to fund you joining a group where you can get a lot of the same support you would get just with a bunch of people who don't work at your company.
Perfect. Thank you both. Moving along here, next question. So what is your approach or recommendation to understand the perspectives of colleagues from different backgrounds, right? How do you go about initiating that conversation, tactfully, tastefully, but also from a point of genuine interest in learning.
Yeah, and I think that's the important place, is to come from a genuine interest and just be real about the fact that you don't have all the answers and that you may actually make some mistakes along the way, right? But having the conversations and starting the conversations with individuals that are different from you are the way bridges are built and how they're mended. And so I would just encourage you to have those private conversations. The other thing is you need to get yourself educated. It's not the responsibility of the diverse groups within your company, within your organization or in your life, to educate you, even though it's great to ask the questions and have the conversations. The other thing you need to do is commit to getting yourself educated, so that you can have more valuable and meaningful conversations.
Perfect. Anything else to add, Ashleigh?
Oh, you kind of nailed that. No, honestly, it really comes down to it's having grace. It's owning your own education, not insisting on waiting on others to educate you. The other thing I'll say is own up when you screw up. One of the most powerful interactions I had in 2020 was I was at a happy hour and I made a comment. I made a comment that was accidentally insensitive. I was just trying to find commonality, but in making commonality, I diminished the other person accidentally. They called me on it. And this was a woman of color. We were talking about hair, and she called me on it. And I was like, wow, it was just like, whoops, that was totally me. And she's now a dear, dear friend of mine, actually. And she told me afterwards that just seeing me acknowledge what I did, know what I did wrong, and make that change that quickly, she said, gave her hope during a time when she felt like she was screaming at people all day, every day on these topics and no one was listening. So just acknowledging and showing that change can be not just good for you, but this is the discussion and the thoughts on DEI, kind of like Heidi said at the very beginning of this. I hope that we can stop having these conversations. It's kind of like going to the doctor. I hope I never have to go to the doctor again. I hope we can stop having these conversations someday, but the way there is with a million tiny moments. These aren't going to be big eurekas. It's going to be a million tiny things, and us insisting on change while allowing people to be human, which is a really hard balance to strike. So when it comes to understanding perspectives, it's get curious, be genuine, own your own education, and own up when you screw up, because you will.
Perfect.
100%.
All right, just a couple more left, and we'll get through them. We'll try and do this as quickly as possible. We'll do one and one this time. We'll start with you this time, Ashleigh. What is, according to you, the most difficult part of implementing a DEI program?
Well, this is what we've always done. It's a status quo. It's fighting the status quo is always the hardest thing. So you're working with a sales leader who has 20, 30, 40 years of experience, and they've always sourced this way. They've always interviewed this way. They've got their bomb set of interview questions. And all of a sudden they realize, wow, why is my sales floor why is my sales floor exclusively this one race and predominantly this one gender? I mean, they're doing well, but we know it's not sustainable. And it just is really hard to break that thought pattern of, this has worked before, but it might not work going forward, or the way that it works is not something that is actually sustainable 30 years into the future. So
can I add one more thing I'm sorry, Ashleigh, go ahead.
That's hard, and I find honestly, in my experience, I found if I run into someone who is kind of that status quo mindset, I've stopped trying to convince them. I give them a shot or two. I'll give them a couple points. I'll try and probe. I'll try and do a challenger question and be like, hey, let's try and challenge these assumptions a little bit. But I don't waste a lot of time on it. I will go and work on other members of the organization and try and kind of drown them out with other opinions. If we need to get a lot of things on board, if it's a one person and they're just being a roadblock, I honestly stop working with the organization. And that kind of sucks, but I just think that those dinosaurs, they're going to go the way of the dinosaurs eventually. And I'd rather amplify other voices and people who are getting it right than waste my time trying to get this one person to change. No, I'm going to go find 5 people and teach them how to yell. So that's my trick.
And what would
David, the only thing that I would add is for me, one of the biggest challenges is that organizations talk about their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, but they actually don't budget to solve for it. And so that is one thing that I would really encourage corporations to do, is allocate dollars to diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives within their organization. Because if there's not, and if it's not top down, supported top down from the executive level of the organization, you're going to be swimming upstream and probably not get anywhere. So if you have budget and have executive level support, you can really make a world of difference.
I apologize, but I'm such a nerd. I appreciate the alignment and similarity between this effort and a sales effort. So all the people that are watching and a part of this right now, go get bank qualification on your efforts to drive, DE&I in your organization, right? So the drill, just do it right. The other thing that to add here is, obviously this is a very important topic for all of us, and part of the challenge is there's no like quick, easy, simple answers for a lot of these great questions. And so what we'll be doing is actually, because there are still some questions here, I know Ashleigh and Heidi are working on putting together LinkedIn posts. What we'll do is we'll parking lot those questions over to the LinkedIn post, and we will continue to provide answers, feedback, but please do chime in. We do want to hear your thoughts, and please help share the information so that way we can, empower and enable people to be informed, right? Like Heidi said earlier, people need to be able to educate themselves. So it's up to us to kind of help get that information out there. Anyway, apologies. Can talk more and more on this, but we are unfortunately all over on time. I'm getting yelled at as much as you can all cap somebody in Slack. But I appreciate you all hanging out with us and you even going over a few minutes. It means so much. Ashleigh and Heidi, thank you both. This was an amazing section and session, and definitely look forward to following the chatter along as we move forward and take this to LinkedIn and other channels.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care. Bye, David. Bye, Ashleigh.
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you.